Most survivors in an urban collapse don't fall because they lack weapons, supplies, or physical endurance. They fall because they make the same predictable mistake. They rush toward the locations that feel logical. Supermarkets, hospitals, pharmacies, gas stations, hardware stores. These places seem like lifelines, but in a real breakdown, they instantly turn into high-density conflict zones. When thousands of desperate people funnel toward the same resources, those locations become kill boxes, not sanctuaries. This pattern reveals an uncomfortable truth. The more obvious a location is, the more dangerous it becomes, and that is why the majority of survivors fail before the first week. They think like consumers, not tacticians. Real survival begins with flipping that mindset. The safest and most valuable strongholds are rarely the ones filled with resources. They are the ones filled with overlooked resources. Successful survivors search for places that remain invisible during chaos, locations with strategic advantages that the crowd simply doesn't recognize. To qualify as a true urban fortress, a site must meet 4 conditions. Low visibility, so it never attracts a mob. Limited entry points that allow airtight defense. Hidden strategic value such as water, elevation, cold storage, or backup power. And the ability to be fortified within 24-48 hours. The next 7 parts will break down the abandoned locations that satisfy these criteria, places almost no one thinks about, yet outperform every popular survival spot people fight and die over. Among all abandoned urban structures, the cold storage distribution warehouse is arguably the most powerful, yet most overlooked fortress you can claim in the first 72 hours of collapse. Most survivors ignore it because they associate it purely with frozen food. But behind that assumption lies a strategic goldmine. Thick, insulated walls, naturally limited entry points, enormous calorie reserves, and industrial-scale backup power. It is one of the few locations where stealth, defense, and long-term sustainability intersect perfectly. The first advantage is structural. Cold storage facilities are designed to trap temperature, meaning they also trap sound and slow intrusion. The insulated panels, often 10-15 cm thick, act as de facto ballistic buffers. Most buildings have only 2 or 3 loading bays, and sometimes just 1, making perimeter control dramatically easier than in supermarkets or malls. Inside, narrow corridors leading into the freezer rooms create ready-made choke points that a small group can defend against much larger numbers. The second advantage is energy. Many of these warehouses operate with 2,100 kilowatt diesel generators to keep temperature regulated during outages. Even if the refrigeration system is unusable, the generator alone gives you a level of electrical independence almost no other urban structure provides. With careful use, 1 to 2 hours per day, you can run lighting, radios, water pumps, charging stations, and limited cooling without revealing your presence. The third advantage is the resource profile. A mid-sized warehouse can hold food value equivalent to months, or even a year, of survival for a small group. Even if the cold chain collapses, frozen goods thaw slowly behind insulated walls, giving you a crucial buffer window while you preserve, cook, dehydrate, or repackage. More importantly, the building's industrial shelving, pallets, and steel frames allow you to create barricades, elevated shooting positions, and an inner keep in under 24 hours. The final advantage is psychological invisibility. Nearly everyone rushes toward visible retail spaces. Almost no one thinks about distribution nodes hidden in industrial zones. That single fact removes 80–90% of your human threats right from the start. In a world where visibility equals vulnerability, the cold storage warehouse becomes something rare. a fortress filled with resources that no one is looking for. If the cold storage warehouse is a fortress hidden in plain sight, then the funeral home is a fortress hidden in people's psychology. In every collapse scenario, human instinct drives survivors away from places associated with death. That instinct is exactly why funeral homes and mortuaries become some of the safest, most undisturbed urban structures during the first weeks of societal breakdown. The first advantage is predictability of avoidance. While pharmacies, clinics, and supermarkets attract mobs, funeral homes repel them. Even armed groups tend to ignore these buildings because they assume there is no food and no tactical value inside. This psychological camouflage alone gives your group a massive survivability edge. Structurally, funeral homes are ideal for micro-fortification. They usually have a single main entrance, a garage-style vehicle bay for hearses, and 1-2 side doors, far fewer than commercial buildings. Most interiors include thick, sound-dampening walls, private rooms, and narrow hallways that naturally limit enemy movement. Many mortuaries even have reinforced refrigeration rooms comparable to small walk-in freezers in restaurants, rooms that can serve as emergency shelters, secure storage, or last resort safe rooms. Resource-wise, funeral homes provide more than people expect. While they don't offer food, they do offer medical-grade supplies, disinfectants, nitrile gloves, masks, stainless steel tools, metal tables, water access, and various equipment that can be adapted for sanitation, improvised surgery, or preservation of perishables. Some facilities also maintain small backup generators to support cooling systems. Even if the refrigeration units no longer run, the insulation still helps suppress odors, noise, and heat signatures, critical for staying hidden. The biggest risk is biohazard exposure, but this is easily mitigated. Avoid embalmment rooms unless necessary. Don't touch chemical containers without PPE, and restrict living quarters to administrative or ceremonial areas. Once cleared and sanitized, a funeral home becomes as safe as any medium-sized residence. But the true power of a mortuary fortress lies in its invisibility. Most survivors fight for resources where everyone else converges. Very few think strategically enough to occupy a place that others instinctively avoid. In collapse conditions, that hesitation becomes your advantage. Invisibility is security, and funeral homes offer both without effort. Telecom nodes and fiber vaults are some of the most overlooked structures in any city, yet they represent one of the most strategically valuable strongholds in a collapse. While crowds rush toward food, fuel, and medical supplies, almost no one pays attention to the quiet, windowless buildings or underground access points that keep a city's communications running. This blind spot is your opportunity. These sites are built for security, redundancy, stability, and minimal human presence, making them perfect for covert occupation. The first advantage is structural invisibility. Telecom exchange buildings rarely display signage, often resemble vacant offices, and have limited parking, traits that make them blend into the urban landscape. Fiber vaults and underground nodes are even better. They sit beneath the street, accessed only by locked hatches or utility rooms, and are essentially invisible to anyone not specifically looking for them. The second advantage is power redundancy. Telecom facilities usually contain UPS banks, rack-mounted battery arrays, and sometimes diesel generators designed to keep networks alive during outages. Even after collapse, these components often hold residual charge or can be recharged via small external generators. For a survival group, this means stable electricity for radios, lighting, device charging, and surveillance without drawing attention. Third, these locations are engineered for controlled access. Most have only one or two entry points protected by steel doors, badge readers, or reinforced frames. The interior layout is dense with racks and equipment, creating natural choke points. With minimal reinforcement, a small team can defend the structure far more efficiently than open buildings like warehouses or offices. Fourth, a telecom node offers something no other fortress provides: communications dominance. Even if public networks fail, the infrastructure inside can be repurposed. Battery banks can power ham radios, repeaters, encrypted intercom systems, or mesh networks. If your group controls a telecom node, you effectively control a communication hub while others operate blind. Risks primarily involve electrical hazards, high-voltage equipment, and the potential arrival of utility technicians in early collapse stages. Mitigate by isolating dead circuits, securing only a portion of the building, and keeping the exterior appearance unchanged to avoid attracting attention. In a world where information becomes as valuable as food, telecom nodes transform from invisible assets into command-grade fortresses, silent, powered, defensible, and utterly ignored by the masses. District heating plants and boiler houses are among the most unintuitive yet tactically superior strongholds in any collapsed city. Survivors rarely consider them because they don't look like places that hold food, medicine, or valuables. But this misperception is precisely what makes them powerful. They offer energy, heat, water access, structural fortification, and near-zero foot traffic, a combination that few other urban sites can match. The first strategic advantage is thermal stability. These facilities are designed to heat entire residential blocks, meaning their boiler rooms, insulated tanks, and maintenance corridors retain warmth long after shutdown. In cold climates, this can be the difference between life and death. Even when inactive, these structures provide a naturally temperate environment and a controlled space for cooking, drying clothes, or preserving food without exposing heat signatures to the outside. The second advantage is fuel presence and power potential. Many boiler houses store diesel, natural gas cylinders, or even coal reserves. Even small quantities become extremely valuable during collapse, especially when combined with the building's existing piping and pressure systems. Some facilities also have backup generators to power pumps or control systems. While you may not run the full boiler safely without technical expertise, you can repurpose the fuel, the generator, and certain heat exchanger components for off-grid electricity and water heating. Third, boiler houses are defensive by design. They typically have thick fire-rated walls, reinforced doors, and minimal access points built to contain explosions or fire hazards. For a survival group, these same features translate into excellent defensibility. Internal catwalks, ladders, and elevated service platforms create vertical layers you can use for overwatch, ambush points, or emergency fallback positions. The fourth advantage is water infrastructure. Heating systems often include large holding tanks, pressure vessels, or feedwater pipes. Even if the system no longer functions, the tanks themselves become invaluable reservoirs for storing treated water or collecting rainwater. The primary risks are mechanical. Pressure systems can be dangerous if tampered with, and residual gases may linger in pipes. The solution is simple. Do not attempt to operate the boiler. Instead, isolate valves, vent open lines, and use the facility purely as a fortified shelter and resource hub. In summary, district heating plants offer what few other fortresses provide: warmth, fuel, structural resilience, and near-perfect obscurity. In a cold or resource-scarce urban collapse, this makes them one of the smartest, least contested bases you can occupy. Stormwater detention tanks, drainage vaults, and utility tunnels form a hidden layer beneath every major city, an engineered underworld designed to move water, electricity, fiber, and maintenance crews without public visibility. In a societal collapse, these underground infrastructures become some of the most stealth-dominant strongholds available, offering concealment, mobility, and natural protection from overwatch threats on the surface. The first advantage is near-total invisibility. Crowds never flock to these areas. Most people don't even know they exist. Manhole covers, locked maintenance doors, and fenced-off drainage fields go completely ignored during chaos. A group that secures an entrance and establishes internal control effectively disappears from the city map. Overwatch drones, rooftop snipers, and ground scouts will overlook you simply because no one expects survivors to hide where only municipal engineers normally go. The second advantage is acoustic and thermal masking. Underground chambers trap sound and stabilize temperature. This allows for cooking, tool use, meetings, or sleeping without revealing noise or heat to the outside world. In an environment where infrared scanning or sound-based detection may be used by hostile groups, this level of natural signature suppression is priceless. The third advantage is covert mobility. Utility tunnels, especially those connecting waterworks, telecom nodes, or industrial districts, provide protected routes for movement and resupply. Even short segments allow you to bypass hostile zones on the surface, avoid ambush routes, and maintain surveillance escape paths. The fourth advantage is water potential. Detention tanks and drainage vaults regularly accumulate runoff, which can be filtered and stored. Large concrete basins offer thousands of liters of capacity, making them excellent long-term reservoirs once disinfected. The key risk is environmental hazard, toxic gases, H2S, methane, flash flooding, low oxygen, and confined space dangers. These risks are serious but manageable. Always test air with a multi-gas detector, identify upstream flood sources, establish rope line navigation routes, and create a two-way escape plan. Never occupy a chamber directly connected to an active storm drain during rainy seasons. With proper precautions, stormwater tanks and utility tunnels become unmatched stealth fortresses, places where a small group can vanish completely, move undetected, and survive with a level of concealment no above-ground structure can provide. Abandoned industrial lofts and old textile mills are some of the most structurally resilient and tactically flexible buildings in any collapsed city. Built during eras when manufacturing demanded heavy machinery, these structures were engineered for load-bearing strength, fire resistance, and long-term durability, qualities that make them exceptional defensive positions. Yet because they lack immediate consumer value, most survivors overlook them entirely. The first advantage is structural superiority. Industrial lofts often feature thick brick or reinforced concrete walls, massive support columns, steel beams, and floors rated for extreme weight. These characteristics naturally resist small arms fire and slow forced entry. Unlike modern commercial buildings with lightweight facades, old industrial architecture absorbs impact, muffles sound, and maintains internal stability even when windows or upper floors are compromised. The second advantage is controllable footprint. Although these buildings can be large, you never need to occupy the entire space. Administrative offices, mezzanines, side workshops, and enclosed machine rooms can be isolated and converted into compact, highly defensible living quarters. By sealing stairwells, locking freight elevators, and limiting movement to a single controlled level, a small group can defend an enormous structure with minimal manpower. Third, industrial lofts offer resource potential unmatched by residential or retail sites. Even abandoned, they typically contain metal shelving, piping, wiring, pallets, belts, pulleys, motors, and hand tools that can be repurposed for repairs, weapon modification, water systems, traps, or small-scale manufacturing. In long-term collapse scenarios, the ability to fabricate and maintain equipment becomes as valuable as food. The fourth advantage is elevated command and visibility. Upper floors provide natural overwatch and sniper-resistant observation points. Their height gives early warning against approaching groups, while interior stairwells create choke points that can channel intruders into narrow kill zones. The primary risks involve flammable remnants such as solvents, oils, or leftover chemicals. These can be neutralized by isolating hazardous rooms and ventilating the building before occupation. Structural hazards, like weak upper floors or rusted equipment, should be assessed but are usually manageable. In short, abandoned industrial lofts transform from forgotten relics into strategic production-capable citadels. They provide durability, vertical control, and fabrication potential, three advantages that become irreplaceable as the collapse shifts from short-term chaos to long-term survival. Rooftop water tank clusters and service penthouses are among the most unconventional yet tactically superior strongholds in a collapsed city. Survivors instinctively search horizontally, street level, ground buildings, obvious resource hubs. Very few ever think vertically. This psychological blind spot makes rooftops one of the safest, least contested, and strategically dominant environments available when the streets become hostile. The first advantage is elevation superiority. Operating from high ground is one of the oldest military principles, and urban collapse doesn't change that. Rooftops allow long-range observation of nearby streets, approaching groups, smoke signatures, or nighttime movements. You gain intel without exposing yourself, and you can establish early warning systems far more easily than in ground-level structures. The second advantage is restricted access. Most rooftops are reachable only through a locked stairwell door or a service ladder. Once secured, a single reinforced point can control all movement between your position and the building below. Even if the building becomes occupied by others, the rooftop itself can remain under your control with proper barricades and fallback routes. The third advantage is water and resource value. Many older buildings have rooftop tanks holding hundreds or thousands of liters of water. Even when empty, they serve as durable containers for rainwater harvesting. Combined with the flat roof space, ideal for solar panels, radio antennas, improvised greenhouses, drying racks, or concealed observation posts, you gain both water independence and multi-use infrastructure. The fourth advantage is low signature. Most people scanning rooftops don't look for signs of habitation unless they expect snipers or large groups. A small survival team can operate with almost zero detection by keeping noise minimal, avoiding bright lights, and using the penthouse interior as living quarters while reserving the roof for surveillance and utilities. The key risk is line-of-sight vulnerability from taller nearby buildings. Hostile marksmen could theoretically target you if they gain elevation advantage. This can be mitigated by choosing rooftops with limited higher vantage points nearby, building low-profile windbreaks, and keeping movement crouched or shielded. In a collapsing city where ground-level chaos becomes the norm, rooftop tank clusters and service penthouses offer something rare. A fortress that commands visibility, restricts access, secures water, and remains almost entirely overlooked by the masses. When society collapses, survival isn't won by the strongest or the most heavily armed. It's won by those who understand a simple but brutal truth. Crowds kill faster than hunger or violence. Most survivors rush toward the same obvious targets: supermarkets, hospitals, pharmacies, gas stations, creating immediate conflict zones where desperate people collide with limited resources. These places become traps, not lifelines. The 7 locations analyzed in this series represent the opposite philosophy: low visibility, high-value fortresses hidden behind psychological blind spots, and urban infrastructure design. Cold storage warehouses give you food and energy without attracting mobs. Funeral homes offer defensibility through avoidance. People simply don't want to enter them. Telecom nodes provide electrical independence and communication superiority. Boiler houses give heat, fuel, and thick structural protection. Stormwater tanks and utility tunnels offer total stealth and alternative mobility. Industrial lofts supply manufacturing potential and fortified architecture. Rooftop tank clusters deliver elevation advantage and water security without drawing attention. Each location provides a different form of power: thermal, structural, acoustic, logistical, or informational. None of them rely on luck, brute force, or high-risk scavenging. Instead, they reward tactical thinking, the skill that truly separates survivors from casualties. The common thread across all 7 sites is the principle of asymmetric advantage. You gain more value than the effort required to hold the position. You benefit from natural concealment instead of constant combat. You exploit spaces the majority ignores, ensuring minimal competition. Taken together, these sites form a blueprint for urban survival that outperforms every popular fallback location repeated in amateur prepper circles. In collapse conditions, the goal is not to win fights. It's to avoid them entirely while securing the essentials your group needs to endure the long term. Mastering the logic behind these unconventional fortresses gives you something rare in a world falling apart: a strategic position no one else is smart enough to take. And in the end, intelligence, not desperation, is what decides who rebuilds and who vanishes.